It's not that different. Joining me now is the Coalition's campaign spokesperson, James Patterson. James, pretty articulate there from Chris Minns as to why the back-to-work policy matters in the public service. Why weren't you able to make that argument?
Well, Laura, you're right. The Prime Minister has run a shameless scare campaign on this, and it was based on a lie. It was based on the lie that our policy was ever going to affect anyone outside the public service. But the truth is it has frightened people. People were afraid about the impact it would have on them. They have come to rely on flexible working arrangements in a modern economy, particularly in the middle of the Prime Minister's cost of living crisis, to make a modern family life work. And we didn't want Australians to be scared, particularly at a time, frankly, where people have enough worries when they're struggling to pay their bills, whether it's their electricity bill or their mortgage or their rent or their insurance, and when there are turbulent times ahead, when the global economic storm clouds are gathering. The last thing we need is the Prime Minister ramping up the fear about their fundamental working rights. And so we thought it was important to put that to bed, and we've put it to bed.
It is crazy to me that we're talking about a global recession right now because of this trade war. Australia is not going to be unaffected. I mean, why don't any of the major parties seem to have any foresight at the moment? We're arguing over work from home, where if we have a recession, literally hundreds of thousands of people could lose their jobs. It won't matter if they're working from home or not.
You're right, Laura, and I think a lot of Australians would have woken up this morning and, if they're a self-funded retiree or approaching retirement, contemplated their superannuation balances, which have been smashed in the last week, really materially affecting their living standards. And other Australians have heard the reports of a possible recession in the United States leading to a global recession. And then they would have heard the Prime Minister engaging in a reckless scare campaign, a baseless scare campaign, which was very politely and very delicately called out today by Professor Pat McGorry, who was asked this question, does he think the Coalition is planning any cuts? And he said no. He said this is bipartisan. He doesn't think that's happening. But the Prime Minister just ignored that and kept ramping up the fear about people's fundamental services and access to services. I think that's irresponsible. I think that is a failure of leadership. And I think the Prime Minister should just be honest, just tell the truth. If he's got such a good agenda to sell to the Australian people, well, sell that agenda, but don't tell lies about ours.
All right, let's talk about mental health, because this government started the term by cutting those Medicare rebate visits from 20 to 10 for psychologists, and then they've finished the term with a $1 billion promise. I would argue they've really done nothing in between. So I'm tempting you to break this bipartisanship here on mental health, but it hasn't been bipartisan. Do you have a firmer, bigger commitment on youth mental health?
Well, I think you put it very well there, Laura. The government is playing catch-up on mental health. As you say, they started by cutting those Medicare-funded mental health sessions that we increased to 20 down to 10. We've said all term we'll restore that. We've led the way when it comes to youth mental health, whether it's supporting Headspace or youth psychosis. In fact, we had an announcement just last week with Pat McGorry at a Headspace talking about the things that we're going to do around workforce, around all the serious challenges that we're facing. And Labor is just matching us today. They're just trying to catch up to us today. I think we've led on this. This is an area of public policy which you would hope to be bipartisan, that you would hope would be free of scare campaigns. But I think a desperate Prime Minister who cares about nothing more than his own re-election is even willing to weaponise youth mental health in the pursuit of that objective, and I think it reflects very badly on him.
He was tempted not to do that today. He was trying to resist, wasn't he? But look, I'm going to ask you one final question, because although you're in Parramatta today, you are a Victorian. How do you think Victorians would feel about Daniel Andrews giving Anthony Albanese some backroom advice?
Well, I noticed your colleague Trudy McIntosh asked the Prime Minister about this at his press conference, and as he often did, he did not even attempt to answer her question. He completely sidestepped it and obfuscated, as he often does. I think Victorians, frankly, traumatised by the Andrews government and look back at that time with horror and fear and wonder, why would you want someone like Daniel Andrews, who did so much harm to our state, including, by the way, to the mental health of young people when he locked them out of schools and playgrounds? Why would you want someone like that at the heart of your campaign? Why would you want him as your closest advisor? Why would you want him doing your debate preparation? And the Prime Minister's failure to be honest and upfront and answer that question again reflects very badly on him and his honesty.
James Patterson, good to talk to you. We'll speak soon.
Thanks, Laura.